Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to a new episode of One Mic where I watch shit so you don't have to. And today I'm back for another episode of Fight Talk, talking about UFC 260, Miocic versus Ngannou 2. So I'm just going to cut right to the chase here. I'm a huge Francis Ngannou fan, and I want to spend some time talking about my thoughts going into the fight, what happened during the fight, and why it happened, how Francis won. And then I'll talk a little bit about some of the other fights on that card. But this is where I want to spend the most time, so this is what I'm going to do, and you guys just got to deal with it. So after watching Francis versus Stipe the first time, I made a couple of observations, as I'm sure anybody would have watching that fight. It was very clear what Stipe did right, and or more importantly, what Francis did wrong in that fight that would have helped him win. So I made a few observations. The first was that Francis came out swinging wildly, as he does all the time, though. Like, he starts every fight trying to knock your head off in the first 5 seconds. But what happened in the Stipe fight, two things. One, when he was swinging wildly, he did connect at some points, which is, actually, I'll start that as point one. Point one, he connected and Stipe ate it. That's a problem because most of the time people think, like, if Francis just touches you, you're going to sleep, which is what happens most of the time. But in this case, Francis landed fairly cleanly and Stipe just ate it. So problem one was that Stipe had the chin to handle a fairly clean Francis Ngannou shot. That's a problem that can't be fixed on Ngannou's end. That's going to have to be something where either you land cleaner or harder, or Stipe's chin weakens, one or the other. But that was observation one. Observation two, like I said, he came out swinging. Whenever he would swing wildly or heavy, all Stipe would do is slip it and take him down. And then once he took him down, Francis, didn't have anything for it. So that's observation three. Francis was taken down pretty much at will. And when he couldn't do anything with it. And then observation number four was that he got tired because of that. The heavy swinging, the takedowns, the inability to defend the takedown or get up after he was taken down, all contributed to him being tired. And it all ended up being just a big pot of reasons as to why Francis didn't win that fight and to why he was never close to winning it, really. So going into this fight, I was telling my friend comes over every week and we watch the fights, and I was telling him, after watching Stipe and Francis fight the first time, watching that fight again, there's a few things that I think Francis can do to improve the likelihood of him winning. He doesn't need to fix all of those things that I mentioned. He just needs to fix a few of them. One, don't swing too wildly. Don't come out here just like swinging any old kind of way, because Stipe is slipping those, he's taking you down, and you're screwed. Be patient, essentially. Don't just come out swinging crazy. Two, takedown defense. He doesn't necessarily have to become a great wrestler. He doesn't need to be able to, submit Stipe via twister. He just needs to, if he does go for one of his power shots, or if Stipe does decide to go for a takedown, that he can defend it. And those things were really obvious for me. And I think when it's obvious what you need to work on, it becomes obvious for your opponent what they need to do. And then to compound things even more so, when it becomes obvious what your opponent needs to do, I think that makes the opponent more susceptible to not just getting caught, but just to losing a fight in general. So what I mean by that is, look at Curtis Blaydes and Derek Lewis. It was very obvious. Curtis Blaydes his strategy was going to be to take Derek Lewis down. When your strategy is that obvious, it's easy for your opponent to plan for it, which is what Derek Lewis clearly did. And that's what I said. I said the same thing going into that fight to my friend that comes over here. I was like, if Derek Lewis either works on his takedown defense or has some sort of plan for what will inevitably be a lot of takedown attempts, he can win this fight. And that's exactly what he did. And so I said the same thing about Francis. If he doesn't swing wildly, he's a little bit more patient. And then also he could stand to work on his cardio because he got tired. But if he works on his takedown defense, he should be good. Going back to the cardio thing, actually, I'm not going to go back to the cardio thing. I'm going to keep going, but it'll come around. So those are the things that I said, if he works on these things, he has a good chance at winning this fight. So coming into fight week, now I'm starting to, get nervous because, like I said, Francis is one of my favorite fighters. He's number 3 behind John Jones and Israel Adesanya, and I'm excited because I've been wanting him to get this opportunity again for a long time. Francis is one of my favorites, for one of my OG favorites. So I really want him to get this shot. I was getting really nervous. So going into the fight, I'm starting to see things that are giving me encouragement. At the weigh-ins, Francis weighed in 263. He usually weighs in somewhere around toward that 265 limit, and he weighed in at 263 for the first fight against Stipe. And ESPN put up a side-by-side photo of each weigh-in with him on the scale doing one of these things, right? 263 both times, but the second picture, the one from this past Friday, Francis just looks a lot leaner. He looks a lot more ripped. He looks a lot more chiseled. He looks a lot like harder, stronger. And that to me told me, I'm like, oh shit, maybe he's been working on his cardio. So so in my head, I'm thinking like, okay, this is encouraging. Because at the end of the day, it's tough to predict that fight because you know that Stipe has the tools to win. You know what Stipe needs to do to win, but we haven't seen enough of Francis fighting to know if he's been fixing the things that he needs to work on. So from my perspective, it was very obvious what Francis needed to do to have a chance at winning this fight. And if it was obvious to me, it was probably obvious to Francis, Stipe, and any of these professional analysts. So when it's that obvious, but you don't really know. So it's like, if he had, some 3-5 round fights or something like that, then it'd be like, okay, well, I haven't seen anything that suggests that Francis has worked on blank. But when he's in there for 40 fucking seconds every time, you never really know, right? So anyway, looked like he'd worked on his cardio. Cool. So I'm like, all right, maybe he's came to play. So the fight starts, and Francis immediately is very measured, very patient. And now at this point, now I'm getting encouraged. So I'm like, okay, I had already said cardio, takedown defense, and patience were the 3 things that I felt like he needed to work on. So he's coming out patient. He's not swinging wildly. Now I'm getting hopeful because I'm like, oh man, he's already worked on 2 of the things that I mentioned already. And so I'm thinking like, okay, he's already got a chance because even if he's being patient, as long as he's not swinging wildly, he decreases the opportunities for Stipe to do the takedowns. So even theoretically, if he hasn't worked on his takedown defense or anything like that, the patience will probably make it harder for Stipe to even attempt, let alone successfully get a takedown. So I said, this is looking promising. And then, man, I think it was, I don't know if it was in the first or if it was late in the first or early in the second. But man, when Stipe went for the takedown and Francis sprawled completely flat, stuffed the takedown, scrambled around, took his back, and started laying in some, I said, oh shit, my boy is ready to go. Like now it's game time. Now I'm thinking like, okay, he's gonna win this fight. Like not he's gonna win, but he can win this fight now. And man, sure enough, when Francis got the win in the second, whoo boy, I was screaming in the garage. I was so happy, man. Because it was one of those things where it's like, yes, I've always wanted Francis to eventually become champion. Yes, I love watching Francis fight. Yes, he's a big knockout artist, so that makes him fun to watch. And, all those things, I've always wanted Francis to win. But I think the reason I was even more excited than I would have been normally was because of the fact that, one, I had watched the first fight, said, this is what I think Francis needs to work on, and then he did that. So it was like, one, it made me feel validated that I correctly analyzed what he needed to do because he came away with the same analysis apparently because he worked on those things. And then 2, it shows me that he worked on those things. Like it wasn't just like Francis isn't just a guy that's just like, hey, I'm just going to come out here and knock your head off. He was taking it seriously. He fixed what he needed to fix. He came in. He's like, this is my chance. I got it before. I blew it. I'm not going to blow it again. I'm going to work on these things. And he did. And that's what made it so cool. Was the fact that Francis Ngannou was not the Francis Ngannou we had seen up to this point. That was a Francis Ngannou who's going to be real fucking hard to beat now, as if he wasn't already hard enough to beat. But, man, and then potentially a fight with John Jones next, like, oh my God. Like, I'm to the moon. Like I was so happy that night, and I'm still happy now, man. It was an incredible fight to watch, and it was incredible to see Francis take that next step to to become a champion, doing what he needed to do, and looking great doing it. Like, oh, he worked in leg kicks. Like Francis, like man, Francis came like like all the time that he spent not in the octagon fighting, getting it, getting in and out in 40 seconds, all that extra time he put into working on the things that he needed to work on. So like that was awesome for me. So in the interest of not having this go too long, I'm only going to talk about a couple other fights. One, the co-main, Tyron Woodley versus Vicente Luque. We all know Tyron's been just not throwing hands. He's had 3 consecutive very bad outings where he has not won a round. He has not looked good. He has looked timid. He has looked tepid. And yeah, this is not someone who appears to be. You saw somebody, Tyron Woodley's last 3 fights. They will be shocked to find out that he was not just once a former champion, but once considered to be one of the best welterweight champions ever. So, yeah, that'd be a tough pill to swallow if you show somebody his last 3 fights. But coming into this one, I thought, okay, he's got to have a sense of urgency at this point. He has to know that he was lucky to not get cut and lucky to get a 4th fight, and that this is it. He does he shits the bed here. He's done. I believe this is the last fight of his contract too. So, are you going to win yourself another contract, or are you going to win yourself an exit? And it looked like he won himself an exit. He did come out more aggressive, and unfortunately, it was to his detriment. He left himself open for a finishing, which is exactly what happened. First round knockout by Vicente Luque. It's a shitty position for Tyron Woodley to be in, because he was so timid in those last 3 fights, which I don't understand that. When you have the reputation that he has, I don't see why you would be that timid. But he was timid in his last 3 fights, and then he overcompensated for that by being too aggressive and too wild, and now he allowed himself to get knocked out. So, if that's true, that's the end of that was the final fight in his contract, then we're probably not going to see Tyron Woodley again in the UFC, which is unfortunate. But he's 38. His heavy right hand has become fairly predictable. He's become fairly timid. Looks like he doesn't really want to be in there. He got in there on Saturday, and he forced things to a point where he left himself vulnerable, and he paid for it. So, yeah, it sucks to see Tyron Woodley go out like that with 4 consecutive losses, none of which did he appear to fight well in. Yeah, I guess that's it for Tyron Woodley. Maybe we'll see him in Bellator. Maybe he'll retire. I don't know. But if I was Bellator, I'd be a little embarrassed to be looked at as like the UFC's like garbage, like recycling bin. Like, hey, here's our old fighters that we don't need anymore. Here, you can have them, and then they can headline your pay-per-views. But the other fight I want to talk about was Sean O'Malley versus Thomas Almeida. There were some people that thought Almeida had a chance to win this fight. I was not one of those people. Sean O'Malley has said that he still considers himself to be undefeated. He doesn't feel like he lost to Chito Vera. I wouldn't go that far. The loss is legitimate. He got kicked in the leg. He couldn't handle it. He went down, and that was that. It's no less legitimate than any other way of losing. Look at well, he didn't lose the fight, but let's say Bilal Muhammad lost the fight to Leon Edwards because of that eye poke. Because the eye poke was inadvertent doesn't make the loss any less legitimate. So I don't subscribe to the idea that he's still undefeated. But what I will say is I feel like Chito Vera got lucky. I don't think he lands that kick any other time. I feel like if him and O'Malley fight 10 times, O'Malley's gonna win the next 9 after that first one that Chito won. So like I don't think Chito Vera is the better fighter. I do think he got lucky on that night. I remember during that fight thinking that Sean looked sharp. He looked great. He looked like he was well on his way to another impressive victory. And then the calf kicks happen, and it is what it is. He lost, but I don't consider I didn't look at that and be like, okay, now I have to reconsider Sean O'Malley's placement within the bantamweight division. I didn't think that. I feel like Sean O'Malley is a likely to be a future contender, and it's probably not going to be too far off. And he's probably going to get a big fight next, and he'll continue to move up. That's how I feel. He had a Another impressive performance that unfortunately was a little, I think, embarrassing by him wanting to always have his walk-off KOs, which I think are super fucking cool, by the way. But it cost him. Well, it didn't ultimately cost him, but it could have cost him in that he, he thought he had the knockoff KO. The fight was not stopped, and he had to resume. And then he ended up fighting another full like round and a half, because I feel like that was in the first round that he thought he had the walk-off KO. He didn't. He had to resume the round. The round ended. They went through the whole second round, and then O'Malley finally gets the finish in the third, and again in impressive fashion. So unfortunate for Thomas Almeida that he had to catch a follow-up after going down, but at the end of the day, when he tried the walk-off and it didn't work, he's not gonna miss that opportunity again. So he had no choice but to follow up. So it is what it is. But great performance again from Sean O'Malley. He's really fucking good. Like, for all the shit that he gets for saying that he's undefeated still, or his appearance, his hair, whatever, the weed he smokes, the stuff he says, whatever the fuck he's doing, right? For all the reasons people want to fashion up to not like Sean O'Malley, at the end of the day, he's real fucking good. So hey, it is what it is, man. Next up for Sean O'Malley should be a fairly decent ranked fighter, I should say, and I look forward to it. So, not too much to talk. Not too much else. I feel like I have time to talk about from UFC 260. UFC's off next week on the 3rd, so there will be no fight talk next week unless there's some sort of boxing thing that I might watch. I don't know if there's anything scheduled or not. And then April 10th, we'll be back for Darren Till versus Marvin Vettori. Return to ABC. I can't remember what the 17th fight card is. Yeah, I'm drawing a blank. It was the Whitaker, was Whitaker Costa, now it's Whitaker Gastelum. And then April 24th, UFC 261, Usman versus Masvidal 2. So I'll see you guys on 3 of the next 4 weeks. Until then, peace.